Yeah, no,
I know that thing. I think you're...
He said to me, he said, no, you get an American seat, get a tube. They're very good with money. I never even heard of that, until then, really. So, I mean, it's just little things like that. I'll run through it, so I'll have a read of it, actually. But have a bit of time.
Hey, you were in the studio last night?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm just mixing the track, and we got into it, kind of didn't get out till about 3. It's one of the new ones off the album, yeah. I was mixing an extended mix of it, just having a mess around. Everyone listening to it. Yeah, it's good fun. And I got my own studio, so it's this kind of specialist thing. You normally farm them out to these very specialised people, and they wreck them and send them back. So I decided to try it myself. So I've been working on it.
But it's a very good record. It's a really good record.
Do you like it?
Okay, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, good, really good.
I like it. I have a lot of trouble sort of saying I think it's great. But just because I hear myself say that. I wish I was just a fan or a punter and I could genuinely like it. But it sounds seeming wildly immodest. I do like it. I had a good time doing it. Some good stuff on there, I think. Like I said the other day, I can't be objective yet. But I'm going to take me a couple of months. I can listen to McCartney 1. I can just listen to that. Yeah, I like that one. It's growing on me.
Those early
You know what I mean? The objectivity.
Yeah. No,
it's true that.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm not good. I mean, I have, but I can't really.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's why. Let me sort of go down. It's a touchy subject, isn't it? When you've done a thing, there it is your presentation. You hope you meant to get every bit of it right.
So I mean, how do you react to criticism? In fact, do you take?
I don't really know. Now I'm being very flash and very nonchalant and saying I don't care. But I haven't seen too many reviews. And when I see bad reviews, it'll hurt me. But I am giving myself a bit easier time in life these days. I've gone through so much criticism, and not just from critics, from people like John, over so many things, that like a fool, I can actually just stood there and sort of said, yeah, well, you must be right, I've done this, that wasn't too nice and stuff. I'm beginning to see it a bit differently now. I'm beginning to see a lot of what they say is their problem, not mine, a lot of the time. And in John's thing, when as you obviously know, he was going through a lot of pain when he said a lot of that stuff. And he felt that we were being kind of vindictive against him and Yoko. In actual fact, I just answered a question on the American TV thing. I think we were quite good, looking back on it, and knowing people in life. Many people were just down tools with a situation like that. You just said, look man, she's not sitting on our amps while we're making a film. I mean, that wouldn't be unheard of. I mean, Sean Penn. Do you know what I mean? Right. That most people would just say, we're not having this person here. Don't care how much you love her. But we were actually quite supportive. Not supportive enough. It would have been nice to be really supportive, because then we could look back and say, weren't we really terrific? But looking back on it, I think we were okay. We were never really that mean to you. And I think a lot of the time, John suspected meanness where it wasn't really there.
Oh, he's presumably very paranoid.
I think so. I mean, he warned me off Yoko once. Look, this was my chick, just because he knew my reputation. I mean, we knew each other rather well. And I felt, I just kind of said, yeah, no problem. But I mean, I sort of did feel he ought to have known I wouldn't. I mean, he was going through, I'm just a jealous guy, he was a paranoid guy. And he was into drugs, heavy.
Yeah, which makes you paranoid.
He was into heroin. And
yes, I know.
See, which I hadn't realised till just now. It's all starting to sort of click a bit in my brain. I was just figuring, there's John, my buddy, and he's turning on me because he perceives that I'm the McCartney bandwagon, he once said to me. They're all on the McCartney bandwagon. He was in interviews. And to me, I was just releasing a record. Okay, so you can call it McCartney bandwagon, but it's no harm. It's no more than anybody else does when he put out a record. And yet things like that were hurting him. And looking back on it now, I just think it's a bit sad, really.
Because I saw that thing in the Observer last week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that starts to show some of the pain he was going through. I think, hell, anyway, look, he was a great guy, great sense of humour. If he did it, I'd do it all again. I'd go through it all again and have him slag me off all again. You know, just because it was so great. Those are all the down moments.
Was it?
But there was much more pleasure than has really come out. Every article now, I'm always saying, I'm sorry if this and that or John or something. Really, I'm quite happy. I mean, I had a wonderful time with one of the world's most talented people. You know, that's like a plus. I say, we had all these crazinesses. But for instance, if someone took one of your wedding photos, if you're married,
Yeah.
someone took your wedding photo and put funeral on it, you kind of, you tend to feel a little bit sorry for the guy. You think, wait a minute, you know. I mean, I'll tell you what, if I'd ever done that to this thing, it would have just hit the roof. But I kind of just sat through it all and was mild-mannered Clark Kent.
But you know, this was hurting you, presumably, though? Or,
not half, yeah.
But I mean, when did you actually get a perspective on it?
I still haven't. It's still inside me. I was just talking to someone the other day. I said, John was lucky he got all his hurt out, got all his pain out, he got all his feelings out. I'm not really that kind of person. I'm a different sort of personality, so there's still a lot inside me that sort of is still trying to work it out. And that's why, you know, it's kind of good to see that wedding funeral bit, because I started thinking, wait a minute, this is someone who's going over the top. This isn't just your average jibe. This is like paranoid. This is paranoia manifesting itself. And so my feeling is just like it sort of was at the time, which is like, you know, he's my buddy. I don't really want to do anything to hurt him, or his memory, or anything. I don't want to hurt Yoko. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I understand what went down. Or it doesn't necessarily. I mean, I went at Yoko's request. I went to New York recently. Did you say sugar?
No.
I went to New York. She said she wanted to see me, and I said I was going through New York and stuff. And so I kind of stopped off and rang her. She said she couldn't see me that day. I was in New York. I was like 400 yards away from her. And I said, well, I mean, I'll pop over any time today, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whenever you can squeeze me in. She said, it's going to be very difficult. I said, well, okay, I understand. What is the reason, by the way? She said, I was up all night with Sean. I said, well, I understand that. I got 4 kids, you know, I understand that. It's terrible and stuff, but you're bound to have a minute today, sometime. I said, I'm leaving soon. Can't really hang around. And she asked me to come. Flown in specially.
Oh, wait, you've gone there specially?
Yeah,
See her?
yeah, to see her. She didn't see me. So I kind of a little bit humiliated, but I said, okay, 9:30 tomorrow morning then. Let's make an appointment. She rang up about 9 o'clock and said, could you make it tomorrow morning?
But I mean, completely off the record, I mean, she's still on something, isn't she? I was told she's still on methadone, isn't she?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I mean,
I honestly don't know, man. I honestly don't know. So that's the kind of thing, you know, what I'm saying is like, I'm beginning to think it wasn't all my fault. I'm beginning to let myself off a lot of it.
Do you have a lot of guilt? Did you take them?
Yeah, well, when some of the world's greatest entertainer calls you Engelbert Humperdinck, you get feelings of something. And yeah, I always felt guilty. Always felt guilty. But looking back on it, I keep thinking, okay, let's try and analyze it. Now, John was hurt. What was he hurt by? What was the single biggest thing that we can find in all our research that hurt John? Now, the biggest thing I can find is that I told the world the Beatles were finished. I don't think that's so hurtful. I know he'd said, you know, it was like for publicity for my album, but I don't even think that's hurtful. Big deal.
No,
4 months after the group.
Traditionally, people do these things at the appropriate point anyway. You might as do that.
But 4 months after the group's broken up, and we've waited for 4 months to see if it'd get back together again, I then announced. I'll tell you what was unfortunate, the method of announcing it all. Which again, there's a story behind that. Which was that I said to the guy at the office, happened to be Peter Brown of book fame. I said, I've got an album coming out, McCartney. I don't really want to see too much press. Can you do me some question and answer things? So he sent all those questions over. I answered them all. We had them printed up and put in the press copies of the album. But I think the perception of that when it arrived on the journalist's desk was, oh, this is McCartney, really from... Yeah. It wasn't a number, see. I see it now and I kind of shudder. I think, oh, bloody hell. I can see it quite clearly. At the time, it was me trying to answer some questions that are being asked, and I decided to not fudge that question. And I say, looking back on it, I don't think, I mean, if that's the most hurtful thing I did, I haven't really heard much else beyond that. We didn't accept Yoko totally, but like I say, you know, how many groups do you know these days? I mean, it's a joke. It's like Spinal Tap.
Of course.
I mean, the Spinal Tap joke.
Actually, there's something I always thought, you know, I always have this assumption when I go and interview groups, say you interview everyone, you think everyone knows what's going on. And you talk, but you talk to individual members and you find no one knows what's going on. They don't communicate at all, you know. And then you start seeing it on stage, you know, like, you know, you suddenly see how separate they are on stage.
Daltrey and Townsend,
you know, or the Clash was the same, you know.
Daltrey and Townsend on Live Aid. Pete started copying Roger's movements because he knows exactly what Roger's going to do. And so in the end, Roger started doing Pete's movements. They pissed each other up, something terrible actually. But anyway, generally speaking, you know, what I'm saying is, I love John. I was his best mate for a long time. Then the group started to break up. It was very sad. I got the kind of rap as being the guy who wrote the group up.
Right, but
that's not actually true.
But you had to actually do it anyway to get out of that.
No, it wasn't actually true.
Legally,
yeah, legally I had to.
But he'd already said
he was broken actually months before, yeah. And so I got into this legal thing. And, you know, looking back on it, I say I got a lot of guilt off that. But you tell me what you would have done if the entire earnings that you'd earned, and I mean, something like the Beatles, entire earnings is a big figure. This is everything we'd ever done through all the American tours, all the record success, everything we'd ever done up to somewhere around about Hey Jude. And that was about to disappear. It was about to go into someone's pocket. And the guy I'm talking about is Klein, and he had $5 million the first year. He took $5 million the first year he managed the Beatles. So I smelled a rat. I thought, well, $5 million in 1 year, how long is it going to take him to get rid of it all? So I started to resist, and I was given a lot of pressure. They said, oh, you're always stalling. This is when they came to sign Klein's contract. You probably heard of this.
But they thought it was part of you being involved with Linda as well, didn't they? That you wanted to get the Eastons involved. Really.
They said, who are we going to get? We looked at Lord Beeching. Looked at all these people. John interviewed Lord Beeching because he'd done the railways so great. I mean, you're kidding. But we wanted who we called Mr. X. We knew we needed someone after Brian. And so we had a meeting and I said, we really need Mr. X. And if we can get someone really great, it'd be fabulous. So then the Beeching thing came along, and then I just met my in-laws, Lee Eastman, and I was pretty impressed. And he's a pretty impressive guy. And it would have been great. But obviously everyone worried that because it was my father-in-law, I'd be the one who'd look after. I think there must obviously be some element of that. So that worried him. And quite naturally they just said, no, we can't have him. So in the end it turned out to be Klein. And I said to people, well, I want out of this. And they said, you can't. I said, I want to sue this guy, Klein. And they said, you can't. He's not a party to any of the agreements. So it became clear I had to sue the Beatles. So obviously I became the baddie. I put on a black hat. But afterwards, you see, the thing is, it's like when you get in a sensation in a newspaper and the retraction is always a week later on the back sports page, the bottom of the sports page. The truth of that whole thing is that yes, I did take the Beatles to the High Court, which is like a highly traumatic period for me. Imagine, you know, having to front that one out. You know, imagine seriously having to front that one out.
How did you feel through
it?
How did you feel through it?
Crazy, just insane, so insecure. Half of the reason I grew the beard, although the other reason was split left.
Yeah, but I know people actually, when they put hair on their face, often to hide.
It's often a cover-up, yeah. And I had this big beard, so went to the High Court and everything. I managed to save that, and the judge said something about the prattle of a second-class salesman, talking about Klein. And they put in evidence this big, expecting us not to look at it, because their side, I don't think, looked at what they put in. But because my whole life was on the line at that point. I felt this was the fire, this was the furnace, you know. Finally it arrived. And we used to get shakes in our voices. Neil Aspin, well, you talk to Neil about some of the meat things. We got the Nixon shakes. It was something we never ever had before. I remember Neil quite clearly trying to, the aforementioned parties, as if that's going to help anyway. Shut them up. on earth, boys. But yeah, so we went through a lot of all those problems. But the nice thing was, as I say, afterwards, the little retraction on the sports page was that each one of them in turn, just very, very quietly, very briefly said, "Oh, thanks for that. Save all the money." And that was about all I ever heard about it. I've never, to this day, no one's ever gone into depth.
No, that's never actually been said, but or perhaps it has been that you were right. You know, in the end, you were right.
But that's what I mean. You know, well, it was actually said, but again, see, John turned it round, like this thing in the Observer. He said, "But you're always right, aren't you?" See, there was always this thing. So I mean, it was crazy for me because I come from Liverpool, and I thought the idea was to try and get it right, you know. And it was quite surprising to find that if you did get it right, people could then turn that one around and say, "But you're always right, aren't you, smarmy?" Or whatever, you know. You got, oh, and I'm like intelligent enough to be able to see that angle the minute they go, "Oh shit, I hadn't thought of that." It's like moving the goalposts. It's that one, you know. It's like, oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, it occurred quite a few times, you know, because I'm pretty, they kind of, you know, ruthless, ambitious, all that stuff. No more than anyone now trying to break into showbiz. But I'm pretty, can be pretty forceful. If we've got to make a record, I'll actually sit down and write songs.
See, I was always actually,
which can be interpreted as being overpowering and forceful. Go ahead.
I was told, I mean, that in fact, and I'd heard this over the 70s, really, that you were kind of the driving force in the Beatles. You know that
sometimes, you know, sometimes I could be.
That John would be more interested if you hadn't been around to keep him at it. Say in the early days.
Yeah, sometimes. I remember doing Let It Be. We sat in Apple around the table, and I come up with this idea, you know, that we should. I often had an idea. Could be anyone who had the idea, but it happened to be me that Let It Be. I said, it'd be good, you know, if we're going to go in a film. And I remember Johnson said, "Why? What for?" I kind of explained a bit more. He said, "Oh, I get it. You want a job?" "Yeah, that's it." And it was like, "Oh, he wants a job." And it was like, it seemed strange to me that they didn't, but they all seemed quite happy just sort of sitting out in St George's Hill, you know, just languishing. I always wanted to make the group great and even greater. And when we made Let It Be and it was a bit crummy, I insisted that we made Abbey Road. Because I knew what we were capable of, and I didn't think we pulled it off in that Let It Be. And then with the Phil Spector remix, we kind of walked away from that LP. We didn't really want to know. In fact, the best version of it was before anyone got hold of it. The Glyn Johns' early mixes were great, but they were very bare, very Spartan album. But it's great. Now it would be one of the hippest albums going if they brought it. It's probably on bootlegs.
Yeah, sure.
But before it got its overdubs, before it had all its raw edges off it, that was like one of the best Beatle albums because it was a bit kind of avant-garde really, because it was just purely as we recorded it down there in Apple or on the roof. It was that with a good sound on it from Glyn Johns, just a couple of mics over the drums, and that. Very basic because he's a basic project, and I loved it. But no, but what was it talking about on the Let It Be thing? On those things,
the driving,
often, yeah.
It's also about the driving.
So I became known as being overpowering. So it was Abbey Road we were doing, yeah, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, because I got some grief on that. It took 3 days to do that. Yeah. Now you know how long Trevor Horn takes to do a mix for Frankie. Sure. You know, so that's the strange thing. I feel vindicated as time goes on. I'm beginning to understand what I was doing, and that it was half of it was as innocent as I thought it was. I didn't think we got Maxwell's Silver Hammer right, so I kept pushing to get it right. And they said, "Man, we spent 2 days on this song already." Which, you know, now, 2 days it takes to switch on the Fairlight. Yeah, it does, man. I had a group the other day, spent 2 days trying to find the on switch. It's serious, you know. But that's what we're into these days, you know. So, let's say, you know, on one of the sessions, it was around about Maxwell Silver Hammer time. This did used to, I'm sure it did piss people off, and much as I tried to not piss people off, obviously, if you are I don't know, driving force, overbearing, whatever you want to call it, if you are on the ball, perfectionist, whatever, it can annoy some people. Because some people can just say, "Oh, come on, man, hang out, come and just have let's go and have a drink, you know, let's go have a smoke or something, let's just lie in." Which, you know, I did plenty of anyway. I mean, it wasn't as if I was just a relentless crazy. I mean, I did plenty of the other. It just seemed to me when we had a session booked, it was a cool idea to turn up. You know, but that wasn't always the case. Like Sergeant Pepper, George turned up for his number, and a couple of other sessions, but not very much else.
Because George was supposed to have resented you for always getting on his back.
He did resent it. But you see, for instance, two examples. One, on Abbey Road, I was beginning to get too producery for everyone. George Martin was the actual producer, and I was beginning to sort of be too definite. And George and Ringo turned around and said, "Oh, look, piss off. We're fed up. Just back off. We're fine. We're grown-ups, and we can do it without you. Fine." So I kind of go, oh, one of those people like me who don't realise when they're being overbearing. It can be it can become as a great surprise to actually be told you are overbearing, you know. So I completely clammed up and sort of backed off and sort of went, right, okay, I'm burned. Back off. They're right. I'm a turd. Sit here, fine. Okay, guys. So a day or so went by, 2 days, and the session started to flag a bit. Ringo eventually turned and said, "Come on, produce, come on." And so it was like, you couldn't have it both ways, you know. You either had to have me doing what I did, which, let's face it, you know, I hadn't done too bad, or I was going to back off and become paranoid myself, which is what happened. There's a lot of Wings was to do with that I'd been told I was so sort of overbearing, that for instance, if the guitarists in Wings wanted to play a solo a certain way, I wouldn't dare tell them not, that it wasn't a good idea. And the other example that really pissed George off, but I do think I was right, was when we were making Hey Jude, but you're always right, you know, I hear it now, you know, it's still got the same. Anyway, was we were making Hey Jude, and to me, it had to have a sparse opening. Hey Jude, 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 Jude. Just have this intimate opening, and it was going to build, and a kitchen sink, and eventually get to Nirvana, or near Nirvana. Anyway, so I start off, Hey Jude, and George went, don't make it bad, take a sad song, I'll make it better, and George was answering every line through the whole song, and I just said, no, I really don't want that. It's my song. So we always had, the rule was whoever song it was got to say how the arrangements were. So of course, you know, that pissed him off. And I'm sure I pissed Ringo off when he couldn't quite get the drums to USSR, and I sort of sat in. I'm actually still very aware of that. It's a very weird thing to know you can do a thing that someone else is having trouble with, because one, you make it very simple, but just going down and doing it and just bluffing right through it and thinking, the hell, at least I'm helping. But obviously the paranoia comes in is, but I'm going to show him up. And I was very sensitive to that. I still am. I remember sort of hours sitting around thinking, should I say anything? And in the end, it always came to, you should have said something. So, you know, it's a very hard thing to balance that. So in the end, like I say, sometimes I was overbearing, sometimes they liked it, so it worked out.
Do you have much to do with them now, George?
I'm just starting to get back with them, really. It's all business troubles. It's all business troubles.
Seems to be. I mean, you know,
that's what spoils the whole thing for us. If we don't talk about Apple, we get on like a house on fire. The minute anyone mentions Apple, something comes up, and they'll sort of say, well, you wouldn't show us your records to the accounts or something. And I'll sort of say, but I did. Your man is now at this moment in my office. And I say, oh, like hell he is. And we have major misunderstandings over things like that. But I do bend over backwards to sort of try and not be sort of crazy with that stuff. But no, so I've just started to see them again. And I had a great day the other day with George. He came down to visit me. And we really had, for the first time in billions of years, we had a nice time. Because George was my original mate in the Beatles.
Well, more than...
I knew George
yeah.
before. Well, he lived near me. So he lived in Upton Green. Yeah. Little close kind of thing. And I lived in Ardwick Road. And it was like half a mile away. So we were mates, took the same bus to the same school, the 500, which was the Express. So we took the same bus, so we often would sit together. And then we got a guitar about the same time. And we went through the chord books, the same Bert Weedon guitar technique chord books, in which we learned D and A together and E. And we were quite big buddies then. So that was something I'd missed really through all these years. You know, we'd got all professional and Beatles and everything. And you lose that, obviously. And he just came down the other day and we didn't talk anything about Apple. And we didn't pick up. Somebody said, I told somebody else this the other day. that I'd seen him. And they said, did you play together? It was American. I said, nope, didn't touch an instrument, didn't do anything. It was just back as mates, like on the bus. Because he's very into trees and planting and horticulture, as I am more now. So we talked about planting trees. What's that plant? That's nice. And it was really great to actually sort of relate as two people and try and get all that crap out the window and put it to one side for once. It's such a weight, that stuff.
But that seems to be part of the process. He seems to be emerging more anyway, actually,
yeah.
the last sort of
yeah,
year
he's
or so.
coming
He
to
seems
now.
very introverted.
We're all kind of coming to. I mean, that, we all brushed off this whole Beatle episode and sort of said, well, it's no big deal. Obviously, it's a big deal. It was a huge
big deal.
Right. It's, if there ever was a big deal, that was it, So I don't think half of us know what happened to us, really. I mean, I can never tell you what year a thing was. Literally, they all just go into like a haze for me, the years and stuff. So I know like what we did and what we did, but I keep seeing pictures of myself, like shaking hands with Mitzi Gaynor. I didn't know I met her. I mean, it's that vague. And yet, I look as straight as a die in there. I'm not kind of...
I mean, is that because you were on speed or dope?
I don't think so.
Or
No, I think it was just
the momentum.
life was speeding.
Sure, yeah.
You would just meet Mitzi Gaynor for 5 minutes and then you go and meet Jerry Lewis's kids. It's kind of very difficult after a while just to know if you met 50 of them. In LA, we'd met millions of them. It was probably just at one of those star celebrity bashes. But I keep seeing photos of me with people that I didn't even know I'd met. It's quite embarrassing. It's just saying how I met you, and they're very famous. Anyone else in the world would remember they'd met them. It seems like I'm being big time to think I'm being arrogant. Exactly. It's flaco. I mean, it is. Bowie's got that problem too, because he was probably a bit more flaky. But he's got huge periods of his life he just does not know what happened. What a scene. It was a laugh though, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, that's some good times. But no, that kind of thing goes on.
But I mean, when you were like, the money started to come in, were you aware of this, or were you just like living your life and you'd hear suddenly you're worth so much and then you're worth so much?
Yeah, we used to ask them, am I a millionaire yet? And I used to say cryptic things like, on paper you are. I said, what's that mean? Am I or aren't I? Well, strictly speaking, you are. I said, in my bank, are there more than 1 million of those little green things yet? Well, it's not actually in a bank, but with the pay and the thing, we think you are. It was actually very difficult to get anything out of the machine, and the accountants never made you feel successful. I remember we had the top 5 in America, and I decided I wanted to buy a country house. And I wasn't asking for the world, it was those days it would have cost about 30,000, top whack. And I went to the accountant and he said, you have to get a mortgage. I said, what do you mean a mortgage? Aren't we doing well yet? Got the top 5 in America, the biggest market in the world. There's got to be some money coming up. They always try to keep you down. So you didn't actually get much of a feeling of being very rich. And I mean, the first time I actually saw checks was when I left Apple. And it wasn't me that saw them, it was Linda. Because we'd co-written a few of our early things. I Live and Let Die, she helped me with some words on. So I put her down as co-writer, which the writers didn't like.
Yes, yes.
The
ATV.
publishers, ATV didn't like. In fact, they sued me for $1 million here and $1 million in New York. Very charming, I thought, after all I'd done for them.
What happened? I can't remember the result.
We settled some way. Lee Eastman stepped in and settled and did some deal. It was a very good deal, probably. It was his top man. But no, the first checks were Linda's. I actually saw royalty checks coming to Linda. Oh, wow, I bet I got a few of them somewhere. But mine never came to me. Always went to a party aforementioned and adjudicated to said company. It always just went down a big well, and we never saw any. So we didn't have much of a feeling of being that well off, although we spent it with great glee.
Miles, do you know Miles? Of course,
Miles, which Miles?
Miles.
International Times.
Yeah. He told me a story of like going round to the Asher's place. I think you were aware on tour. Peter Asher showed him into your room, and he sort of looked at it. He sort of said, "Look," and they opened a cupboard and like.
Yeah, I've heard that story. In fact, I read it. I'll tell you. I mean, maybe that's true. I don't remember that, and things do get exaggerated. Maybe I've unexaggerated my memory of it. I never remember actually having a wad of money like that. I certainly...
Because I always heard that, like, when Brian did his deals...
It was nice of him not to nick it anyway. No, I said...
It was the 60s,
yeah.
In the 80s it had been gone.
Maybe that's why I never saw him. He probably had it away. No, I mean, I don't really remember that. In fact, that was another thing I must... Because I saw the word Miles, and I did know Miles very well. He was a good mate, yeah. I haven't seen him for a long time. But he was like my mate. Has he done a Ginsberg? Great, yeah. That'd be all right, because he's a good guy, Miles. He'd never get his other name out of him. Barry it is, because he was being very cryptic. That's cool. What's your name? Miles. Miles what? Miles. We had many a wondrous stoned evening in his place with listening to all sorts of stuff. Because that was another of the interesting things that. See, I think I've got like a certain personality, and to me, if I give charity, I don't like to shout about it. So some people think I don't give charity. If I know I get into avant-garde stuff, I don't particularly shout, "Hey, you know what I'm into now? Avant-garde stuff." I just kind of do it and get on with it. So way before John met Yoko and got avant-garde, I was like the avant-garde London bachelor with Miles, my pad in St. John's Wood. I was making like 8mm movies, showing them to Antonioni. That was pretty far out stuff, you know. And putting, I had all sorts of theories, you know, of music synchronization, where we'd put on a Ravi Shankar record to our home movies and it'd synchronize. I just did it with my kids the other day, actually, with our home movies. It does, it fits. Yeah, it is. I was doing this in the 60s. But, you know, I had a lot of this, and John used to come from Weybridge, kind of looking slightly goofy and kind of say, "Wow, you know, great, this is great, we should do more of this." But I always had this sort of attitude of, well, you know, I am sort of what I am, and this is me just learning and getting. So Miles, anyway, turned me on to a lot of that International Times, was it the Green Review or something? No, Evergreen.
Yeah.
Evergreen, all those little things. There were lots of very far out.
You tell me about I've been painting in the tracks.
Yeah, you know, and we used to do a lot of that. But I mean, it never really came out about me. When John went avant-garde, you knew about it.
Was that because he was a self-publicist, or was it just that happened?
No, he's just enthusiasm for whatever he was doing. John was very upfront. I'm not as upfront. I'm just a different personality. You know, it just doesn't occur to me to tell people everything I'm doing. But you know, I was into quite a sort of heavy avant-garde trip. I'd sit with Burroughs in a basement, and there was a couple of gay guys, William Burroughs, that knew William. Some guy he'd known from Morocco, who was like friends of mine. I don't know how I got him. Jumped in the bar, and I had faith in the crowd. And it was a scene around London, you know. It didn't matter, gay, schmay, who cared, you know. And we used to sit down in Montague Square, where John eventually got a flat. That was
where he got busted.
a connection, where he got busted. That was where we used to go. And I remember sitting around with Burroughs, you know, to do little tapes and backward guitar and cello and crazy stuff. But it didn't occur to me, the next Enemy interview I did, to say, "Hey, have you heard William Burroughs, man? He's in town, and he's writing the greatest avant-garde shit in town." You know, maybe it would have been good for me to do that, I don't know. You know, I just kind of do what occurs to me, you know, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But, let's say, you know, Yoko turned up to see me first in London. She met me before she met John.
Yes, no, I didn't know that.
See, this is what I mean, you know, and you won't hear it off them either, because they're Scott and Zelda. You know, they want the story just how they put it out. Yeah. She turned up for a charity thing. It was something to do, she wanted manuscripts. Something to do with avant-garde music. Cage, John Cage in New York. There was some benefit for somebody. And she was looking for manuscripts. Any spare lyric sheets you had around, and I was pretending to be on the backs of envelopes and quite funky little things. And to tell you the truth, I didn't want to give her any. Big deal. So, you know, I'm allowed. I don't have to, do I? I didn't want to. I kept these manuscripts. They're very precious to me, and the cause didn't seem so great. I forget what it was. So I said, but my mate might be interested. John, you know, and I gave her John's address, and I think that was first how they hooked up. And then she had her exhibition and stuff, and then their side of the story starts to happen then. Also, I kind of say, I feel like I'm kind of justifying living, which is a bit of a piss-off, because I don't really want to have to sit around and justify myself. It's a bit humiliating. But there are lots of things that haven't come out. I mean, for instance, when they bust up their marriage, she came through London. He was in LA doing Pussycats with Nielsen and having a generally quite crazy time of it all. And he was the guy, the famous story, don't you know who I am? He says to the waitress, she says, yeah, the jerk with the Kotex on his head. And he was doing that, and fighting and photographers and haranguing the Smothers Brothers. And generally being quite crazy because he genuinely loved Yoko. And they had a very, very deep, strong relationship. But they were into all sorts of crazy stuff, and I don't know the half of that. A lot of people don't know the half of that. There's hints that it keep coming out in books, but you never know whether you can believe those.
You mean occultism or
all sorts. Well, I certainly did get a postcard. We all got postcards from Yoko saying, "Go around the world in a southeasterly direction. It would be good for you. You're allowed to stop at 4 places." George Martin got one of those, and he said, "It would be all right if I go to Montserrat." And I said, "No." Actually, John did the voyage. John went on a southeasterly direction around the world. But we all kind of went, sure, we'll go around the southeast. Well, I mean, I sat with John and Yoko. Well, I was going to tell you about the marriage thing. I remember, there's so many memories come flooding in. And it's like a psycho session the minute I get on this stuff. I'm on a couch, and I'm just trying to purge it all, I sat at dinner with them once. Linda and me came over and we sat at dinner. And John said, "You fancy getting the tree panning thing done?" I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Well, you can have a hole bored in your skull and, it relieves the pressure on the brain." I said, "Well, look, we're sitting at dinner and this is seriously being offered as a serious..." It wasn't a joke.
It was in the 60s, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I heard people were into that.
Yeah, people were into it. Now, this wasn't a joke. This was like, let's go next week. We know a guy who can do it, and maybe we all go together.
That was your third eye.
Yeah. And I said, "Well, look, you go and have it done. And if it works great, tell us all about it. We'll all have it done." But I'm afraid I've always been a little bit cynical about stuff like that. Thank God, I think. Because I think, there's so much crap you've really got to be careful of. But John was more open to things like that. I think his quote about Klein kind of sums it up. Anyone who's been so bad-mouthed can't be that bad. And there was this kind of crazy reverse logic that anyone who was that bad must be good.
Be all right, yeah.
And it's very difficult when you start going crazy.
Hitler must be okay.
Hitler presumably must have had some good points. But this is what I mean. It's very difficult to cope with that kind of thinking. Because you're having to... it's bad enough just trying to be logical. But trying to be reverse logical is very difficult. And I remember getting letters from priests. This priest in a monastery used to send letters where he turned all the words backwards. And that was a hard habit to get out of. Don't know if you've ever gone through that. Where God becomes dog, live becomes evil, and all that stuff. And he was doing this trick. And you start looking at every word then. Memo is, memo. Yeah, it's like numerology. You can't look at numbers without doing the calculation. And I had to train myself to stop, man. I don't want to know about this. I'm sure anyone who's interested, great, good luck to you. I wouldn't put you down. I'm sure there's a lot in it. But I'm crazy enough anyway.
Were you? You were smoking a lot of dope as well. Were you getting paranoid as well? It does make. It doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. No. It's getting quite paranoid. Yeah. I was telling you about the marriage thing when they broke up. Yoko came through London and visited us, which was very nice. And Linda and I just got married just a bit before. We're living in this big sort of old house in St John's Wood. And Yoko came by and we started talking. Obviously the important subject for us is what's happened. You've broken up then, you're here, he's there. What's happened? And she was very nice and confided in us that, it's kind of broken up. But she was being very strong about it, but very, not feminist, but being a strong woman rather than just submitting to it all. And she said, no, he's got to work his way back. If he's to get back with me, I can't just go. And she couldn't, which is good, I think she would be mad to just go and prostrate herself at his feet kind of thing. But she said, no, he's going to have to work it. And I said, well, look, if I see it, are you still in love? Do you still sort of love him? She said, yeah. I said, well, would you think it was an intrusion if I kind of said to him, look man, she loves you and there's a way to get back and you can, it sounds like Beatles songs, it sounds like those, I send all my loving from me to you. And I said this to Yoko, I said, would that be okay, would you hate that? But we might see him around, so I would like to be a mediator in this, because I think the two of you obviously got something pretty strong going. And she said she didn't mind. So that was that visit, and we went out to visit them and then they were doing Pussycats. And it was weird to kind of just meet and everything. But then I just said to John, who was in the house with Nielsen, Jesse, Keith Moon, a few of the guys, and they were all, it was a pretty crazed house there. You hear some of the stories came out of that house, and it was pretty wild days. And I said to him, hey, come here. Come in the back room, I want to talk to you privately. So we went in the back room and I sat him down privately and I said, look, I feel a bit like a matchmaker here, but this girl of yours, she really still loves you. Do you love her? Because I felt like a judge or somebody, in a divorce court, divorce settlement. And he said, yeah, I do. He said, but I don't know what to do. And I said, well, I've talked to her, so she does still love you. But you're going to have to work your little ass off, man. You have to get back to New York, you have to take a separate flat, you have to send her roses every fucking day, you have to work at it like a bitch, and you just might get her back. Which is sort of what he did. But you'll never hear that story. You won't hear that off them, because, I don't know, it gives me too much, I'm too in the story then. They don't want me in the story. Prefer to think John, if you hear it from John's point of view, it'll just be that he spoke to her on the phone and she said to him, come back and sort of work.
But I always sort of found it interesting, the fact that it seemed too much like coincidence to me, the fact he got married, a month after you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was, we spurred each other into marriage. They were very strong together, which left me out of the picture. So I got together with Linda and then we got strong, got our own kind of strength. And I used to listen to a lot of what they said. I remember him saying to me, you've got to work at marriage, which is something I still remember as a bit of advice. I still remember that. And then, I think again, they were probably a little bit sort of peeved that we got married first. Probably a little way, just minor jealousies. And then so they got married.
But I wondered if
I don't know. Who knows? I'm making it up anyway.
I wondered if there was that thing, like you have two blokes who are like good mates.
Yeah.
And then, one of them finds a girl, and the other, maybe the other one doesn't want to. There's like a lot of kind of, the friendship often breaks up. There's quite a lot of bitterness and acrimony.
Wedding Bells.
It seemed like one of them.
Wedding Bells is what it was. The song, the Wedding Bells are breaking up that old gang of mine.
Sure. Yeah.
And we used to know that song. Gene Vincent did it. And we used to sing it. Oh, the gangs are all come. They forgot Sweet Adeline. And we used to know that song. So the association we had when we were young was Army. It was sort of Army song. Where, Army buddies and Wedding Bells are breaking up this Army gang. But for us, the Army became the Beatles. So we always kind of knew that one day Wedding Bells would come true. So, and that was when it did. Still, the thing is, the trouble is, in trying to sort of set the record straight and trying to do all this, I don't want to sort of blame John or make anyone think. I did this thing recently with Hunter Davis, and they pulled out the one line, John could be a manoeuvring swine. Well, I still stick to that, but I better not say it to the Sun, because I'll just get hauled over the coals again. The point was, John was a very human guy, and if you got in a business meeting with him, I'll tell you exactly why I said that, was that we had a business meeting to break up the Beatles, one of the famous ones that we've been having, still haven't done it, 17 years later. We had this meeting where we were in New York, and we all flew in, especially George came off his tour, his disastrous tour he had, it wasn't too good. Ringo flew in, Ike flew in, we were all in New York at the Plaza for the big final settlement meeting. And John was at Dakota, and as you know, his New York geography, that's like half a mile away. And John sent a balloon over, listen to this balloon. You've got to be pretty cool to kind of handle that stuff, Oh yeah, George, blue is cool. Rung him up. You fucking maniac, gonna take your fucking dark glasses off and come and look at us, man. I gave him a whole load of that shit. And later, I was around at the same time with another meeting, similar thing, where John, everything was going swinging, we had it all settled. And the last minute, John asked for an extra £1 million. That's all he wanted, just an extra £1 million. So of course that meeting blew up, disarray, and that finished that particular meeting. Later, when we got a bit friendlier, because occasionally there were little stepping stones of friendship in this kind of apple sea, and one of those times, I said to him, "What was all that about, man? I mean, why did you actually up to the $1 million?" He said, "I just wanted cards for my hand. I wanted cards to play with." Now that's a manoeuvre. That's the kind I wouldn't do that.
Number.
Somebody who's, it's good. It's a good, absolutely standard business practice. You just wanted cards to play with. You wanted a couple of jacks to up your pair of nines. And that's, he was quite open about that. But of course, if I come out now that he's sort of died and all the tragedy that's sort of surrounded him, particularly, the assassination, the craziness, that it would just be a maniac and stuff. It wouldn't just be a car accident. It was particularly bad news for everyone. In a way, I'm kind of expected to just sort of say he was a saint, he was always a saint, I remember him as a saint, and I love him as a saint. But that would be a lie. He was one great guy, and part of his greatness was that he wasn't a saint. He was a great guy, but he was pretty sacrilegious and pretty upfront about it, That was half the fun.
You got an awful lot of shit for that remark you made, like when you were asked after you'd been killed, it's a drag.
It's a drag, yeah.
But that seemed to me like, I didn't understand why, because that seemed to me like classic understatement, I could envisage, saying that. I mean, when you're saying it's a drag, you're always actually saying it's appalling,
Yes, exactly, yeah. But, I think why some politicians are so successful is that they have a little bleeper box in their head before they say things. They run things through their mind and they can see it as a headline. And if it doesn't look good, they edit it.
Sure.
I have that sometimes, but I don't always have that, particularly in moments like that, where all my bleepers go out the window. I mean, we were very surprised to go to work that day. That was like a kind of shock, because, I wasn't going to sit at home. I'll tell you that, just sit at home and watching television and watching the news.
You went to Air, didn't you?
So we went into Air London. George Norman rang me up and said, "Do you want to cancel? I understand if you do." And I said, "No way." I said, I got to walk through this day. So we came up, and it wasn't too bad getting in there, and we did our work of sorts. There was a track called Rain Clouds we were working on, so it was pretty strange. And there was a little Aeolian, Paddy of the Chieftains, Paddy, the Aeolian pipesman. He worked on it. He was good, actually, because he was just the right kind of character to see that day, because he's like a sort of magic leprechaun, Paddy. So it was nice to sort of have a magic person around. It was as if he was a sort of guru somehow, sort of sent to help that day out. So we just beavered on, and just kind of, occasionally sort of, and what had happened is people would do jokes, not meaning it, kind of say, "Well, we'll do the film next week. Yeah, we'll shoot it." And when you heard the word shoot, you go, oh, and everyone, everything you said seemed to be shoot, or, well, we'll, don't gun me. And every time you spoke, you seemed to say all these terrible things. And then eventually, I just thought, well, I've just got to go home now, there's no more work to be done. Like, I can't stay here all night. I couldn't hide it any longer. Well, I came out of the place, and somebody just stuck the microphone, the proverbial microphone, in the window of the car, which I'm mad enough to have open. Because, see, I'm quite outgoing. I was telling the fans, thank you, it's all right, Fab, Macca, thumbs aloft, wacky. To me, that's just being nice. That's just, you see every Liverpool, all right, mate, it's ordinary to me. I'm not going to carry any can for that kind of shit. To me, that's
also
okay.
helps you out as well, doesn't it? I mean,
well, they've now started saying that it's my armour against the fans.
Nick Lowe's said that.
Yeah, it isn't. It isn't an armour. It's a perfectly straightforward way of saying being friendly with people, Anyway, so they stuck this thing in the thing, and he said, "What do you think of the murder of John Lennon or something?" And I actually, if you heard how I said it was what you thought. I said, "It's a drag." And I meant, if I could have, I might have just lengthened that word drag for about 1,000 years to get the meaning in it. But it was all over Montgomery. And of course, the minute that appears in print, in black and white, Paul McCartney on Beating Out Some Movies, the editors have been to it, and so on and so on, and I'm just one of a million punters saying what it is. Paul McCartney, they did in downtown London last night at 9 o'clock, was asked by our reporter, our correspondent, what his feelings were on hearing the death of his dear long brother. The quote was, it's a drag. Hey-ho. On to other matters. In the Philippines today, and people are sure, it's a drag, that's what he said.
No, I understood it. I'm sure a lot of people, none kind of Fleet Street report editors did understand it, It's just,
well, Hunter Davis was on the television that night giving a very reasoned account of John. Yes, he sprang right up there. The puppet sprang right up, and all.
I thought it was a bit odd.
I thought it was well tasteless. We all did actually. Jesus Christ, ever ready with the answer, aren't we? Aren't we just ready with the summary? Mind you, Hunter had admitted to us years ago that he already had our obituaries written. They're all written and on file at the Times. They just update them every so often, which is kind of chilling to learn. That he'd already done us. Well, so obviously he just pulled his obituary out for John and went to it, But, the question is, which is the more sensitive thing? My thing or his thing? You pay your money, you take your choice. He was the guy I rang up about manoeuvring swine too, so it shows what a buddy he is. Immediately put it in print, he didn't sort of edit it out and say, well, to give him his due, he did actually. In the larger context of it, it was quite nice, it was quite reasonable, and he put my point of view. But again, that incident reminded me of John saying we're bigger than Jesus, which is a Maureen Cleave article for the Evening Standard, and John and Maureen were good friends. And in context, it was actually John saying to the church, hey, wake up, we're bigger than you. You actually read that article, he's saying...
You should get your shit together.
Exactly, he was saying, the church is in decline, which it certainly is, certainly nothing wrong with that statement. Well, here anyway. There's a lot of born again in America, Reagan and that, but over here, it's having a hard time. And he was commenting on that, and she sort of said, he said, well, for Christ's sake, he said, we're bigger than Jesus these days. And he meant the church audiences, the church congregations or audiences are on the decline, And he was as always trying to be helpful and trying to, just give his point of view. But you take that out. You send it to Selma, Alabama, you put it on the front page, and you've got little 11-year-olds thumping on your coach window, saying, blasphemer, devil worshipper, blasphemer, devil worshipper, Never forget that sight of a little blonde kid trying to get to us, and he would have done it if he'd have got to us too. But at 11, what does this kid know of life and religion or anything? He's just been whipped up. Are they? Fine. So we've got a little longer, presumably, have we? Where are they? Where are they?
They're just outside.
Okay, so want to cover tea or something?
Yeah, I'd love another one.
Can we have a little more and tell them we'll be 10 minutes, just to give them a wind? Okay.